probably
Yeah.
agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
So do you.
I mean, I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Critch, but.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. It is my Cover 3 college football summer school series, and I'm going to talk about Fresno State today. That's right. We do show some love to the G5 as well here on Cover 3. And my man, Jackson Moore, covers Fresno State, does a great job on Barkboard.com. What's going on, dude?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the love for the group of five.
Dude, yeah, we don't talk a ton, but I feel like we talk more than like the other national shows, and that's, you know, like we if it's an interesting storyline, I think we should cover it. Like, why limit yourself to 70 teams when you can talk 134? So, Fresno has, for my money, like one of the most underrated coaches of like my generation. I mean, Tedford is kind of a wizard if you look at where he's won and what he's done. And I don't know that he gets enough credit as some of these guys do. But you know, I don't think Fresno is like a crazy easy place to win at. And you know, he also won at Cal, which again, everybody else coaches at Cal doesn't quite win, you know, like he did there, at least not in recent vintage. What are you expecting from this Fresno team this year?
You know, Tedford's a big part of it because he was not healthy for the bowl game last year, and you know, it was a little bit concerning for a while there. Was it going to be a fully healthy Tedford to lead the team this year? There were some questions about how healthy he was the last couple of games when the team just kind of tanked at the end of the regular season, but everything we've seen over the course of spring, he seems like his old self. He's even more energetic. So it feels like full speed ahead for this team to not just be back to where they were at 9-1 or 8-1 at one point last year, but they've shored up some things. There was a team last year that had a lot of question marks. They answered most of them relatively quickly, and most of those guys are back this year. So it feels like kind of year two of a two-part process, and they won 9 last year. So I mean, Mountain West Championship, that's the kind of thing they're looking at this season, hopefully for them. And, you know, they want to make some noise in the non-conference too. They get to start at Michigan. They end at UCLA. So chance to make some noise on the national scale too.
They have actually upset UCLA fairly recently. That was, 3 years ago that they took down the Bruins. So
yeah, and that was their 4th straight win over UCLA. So they're looking to make it 5 this year.
That would be wild. They return a whole lot on offense. Receiver brings back a good bit on the outside. We know they took some slot receiver transfers. Also bring back the quarterback. Is this an offense that you're confident takes a step forward? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think so. The O-line is definitely a question mark. It's been a question mark for several years now, and there's been so much talent everywhere else that they've kind of been able to overshadow it. And I think worst case they can do it again this year, but Mikey Keene came in as a new transfer last season, settled in. He should be a much better version of himself this year after a pretty solid season last year. Malik Sherrod's a guy who came in the season a little bit injured, didn't quite get to reach his potential until later in the year, and is going to be there as much as possible this season at running back. They do lose their 2 top slot receivers, Eric Brooks and Jalen Gill, but as mentioned, bringing a couple of transfers. Shaden James was a 1,000-yard receiver at Idaho State. Raylan Sharp just under 1,000 yards at Missouri State, and pretty much all the outside receivers are back. There's 3 or 4 of those guys that were pretty solid last year and are back to be in the same role this season. So a lot of weapons around the offense, and you know, last year they were pretty much all new guys, and then now this year they're veterans, just like that.
Where's a guy on this team who, you know, maybe won't be first team All Mountain West in the preseason, but has a chance to, you know, to make an all Mountain West team by the end of the season that maybe folks don't know about?
Yeah. You know, maybe Tuasivi Nomura. He's a guy that came from USC last year and was hurt for most of the season. When he did play, he was at defensive end. And now this year, he's the guy they've got slated to replace Lavelle Bailey, who was just the do-everything linebacker for the Bulldogs last season. So if he pans out, he goes from a guy that wasn't even playing that position last season to being potentially the focal point of the defense.
This is a team that also adds in Corey Foreman from USC. Is he a guy who, have you been able to see him at all? What are your expectations of Foreman, who was formerly like a top 5 player in the country as a recruit?
Yeah, it's a big deal for Fresno State to get a former 5-star recruit in. And, you know, he was the guy, of course, didn't necessarily have a 5-star showing at USC, but, you know, you take his what the production he did have there, and that kind of guy is still a big get for Fresno State, even if he's not actually maybe a 5-star talent. Heard some of the concern, skepticism about him from the USC side as he got here, and thought I saw some of those flashes early in spring. By the end of spring, he was on the first team. He had just a violent tackle for loss in the spring preview. He's looking the part of a guy that is a different type of athlete that Fresno State usually has. So if he does pan out, I mean, that's huge for the Bulldogs. It also lets them do some different things with the D-line than they probably were planning on doing going into this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of guy that if he actually plays to his ceiling and potential, or even really close to it, I mean, he could wreck every single Mountain West game that they play. Like that, I mean, nobody in the Mountain West, I don't think, has tackles who can block him consistently. Like, that's just not. I mean, I may be wrong. Maybe somebody's got a really awesome tackle they held on to who did not hit the portal. But I mean, if he's playing at that ceiling, like Fresno State's offensive practices have got to be really ugly compared against that guy. He should just be destroying him. That's encouraging to hear. Maybe he's showing some flashes. Who are the other guys on defense who fans of Fresno State really need to know?
Just kind of getting reacquainted with Cam Lockridge. Missed most of last season. He's been an all-conference player at Hawaii, at Fresno State before, and now he's healthy and ready to go. So kind of a plug and play with Carlton Johnson graduating. Cameron Braca, he emerged last year, and now he may be at safety, he may be at nickel. Wherever he's at, he's going to be a key player on this defense compared to a guy that was just kind of emerging last season. At nickelback, that's a question mark whether it is Braca. Someone's got to replace Maurice Norris. That's still kind of the one hole in this defense, but a lot of returners. There's probably about 8 surefire starters locked into this defense who are all guys that Fresno State saw last year. And then mix in Corey Foreman and Tuasivi Nomura, and it should look pretty familiar to what they saw last year.
Schedule is interesting. I mean, they open at Michigan, which is certainly not going to be easy because Michigan, for all the offensive turnover, they did not have a lot of defensive front seven turnover, which is problematic considering like Washington couldn't block them and Alabama really couldn't block, So, but Sac State, New Mexico in these successive games. I mean, all games that Fresno will be pretty heavily favored in by Fresno standards for sure, as New Mexico State and New Mexico both have real significant turnover, both on roster and with the coaching staffs. That's kind of a great lead up in terms of 3 weeks to, I guess, get healthy and work on your stuff as they go into play that game at UNLV.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's a weird case with the Mountain West. There's only 7 conference games this year, so the fact that they don't have to play Boise State or San Diego State's usually a big game on the schedule. It's not on the schedule at all. Last year they went to Utah State and Wyoming back to back, and some inclement weather and elevation. They don't play either of those 2 teams this season, so there's really not much on the conference slate that scares you. Going to UNLV is going to be a big game early in the season. Fresno usually travels pretty well for that game, especially now that it's at Allegiant Stadium. It's not hard to convince the Red Wave to get over there. Probably the toughest game is at Air Force. Just having to contain that triple option on the road in November is going to be a tough one. You look at the other 5 games, if they play to their potential, they should take care of them, I would say. So that's the tough part. There's no divisions. The margin for error is very slim. You could be 6-1. There could be 2 7-0 teams, or you could be 6-1 and get left out in a 3-team tiebreaker or something. So they got to be pretty much perfect in those 7 games. But as far as the draw they got, it's pretty favorable.
I'm excited to see this. I think they have one of, if not the best coach in the league, returning quarterback, a number of nice pieces on defense, and like you said with the schedule, I don't necessarily love Air Force being the 5th game that you play in a row without a bye there, but certainly the games leading up to that are pretty friendly with Nevada, San Jose, and Hawaii. You should be able to work a little. I don't know, maybe just take half of your Thursday and work a little triple prep in the weeks leading up to it, not to look ahead too much. But Jackson, really appreciate this, man. Fresno's got a chance to retake the league this year, and we'll be reading Barkboard and following all your coverage, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.